everyone. Hope you're having a great day. I am Kevin Kelly. He is, of course, Paul Girard. We are Girard and Associates. This is the G&A Way podcast. Check us out at girardassociate.com, girardassociate.com. I'm sorry. It's the website. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, all the big ones. And, of course, thanks for tuning in. Paul, how you doing?
Doing well, Kevin. How are you?
Thank God it's Friday.
Yeah, I hear you, buddy. Well, it's only Thursday, so it's only Thursday today.
Oh, well, that is demoralizing. But you know what is not demoralizing, Paul? This next topic. How'd you like that segue?
Yeah, all right. Well, that wasn't bad.
All right. Yeah, we're starting to hear it more and more. I didn't know I could outsource EMS CQI.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and it means to me as an EMS theorist and as an EMS philosopher that the EMS world generally doesn't know that EMS CQI firms exist.
Right.
And that to me is very vexing because there is a consultant for just about every aspect of the EMS world, provider and agency, yet with the exception of some of the Illuminati from back in the 80s, the EMS celebrity academics preaching the virtues of Deming and Baldridge, it doesn't seem like there's anything else, and it doesn't seem like there is an adequate amount of resources for EMS agencies to gain this knowledge, and that's good for G&A.
Yeah, it is, and I think a big part of the problem is that most people really only kind of pay lip service to the whole QA thing, right? Everybody, when you say QA, but oh yeah, important, got to do it. Oh yeah, we got a program. Oh yeah, but then when you talk to their people who are actually doing it, and you say, hey, what are the problems you run into? For folks who do call us, for example, why are you calling us? What's the issue? And they almost always say money, number one. Yep. And number two is they just tell me to do it and then walk away and don't really want to get all that involved unless somebody kills somebody. Yep. They don't want to really get terribly involved. So I don't think quality improvement has made it to prime time, even though everybody says, oh, yeah, this is really important. We should all be doing it kind of stuff.
Yeah, and accordingly, the holes in the EMS agency quality Swiss cheese, they're not getting any smaller. Time, money, lack of EMS CQI talent, lack of a fundamental knowledge of the G&A 4Cs. Well, so what's the answer?
I think the answer is agency management. Our leaders in EMS have got to get into advocating for quality improvement more than superficially. They really need to stop promoting that quality improvement is critical. Listen, we're patient care centric agencies, right? We're all about patient care. That's what we do. And yet, if you don't have a robust quality improvement program, how do you really know you're doing a great job? And how do you prevent problems from happening that might go against the grains of good quality patient care? So, having that investment in quality improvement is critical. I was talking to someone the other day, and they said that they get paid 3 hours per week to be the quality control officer in their organization, on top of being the EMS coordinator, the chief educator, and a variety of other major tasks. So that agency lumped a whole bunch of individual tasks that each should have their own set of resources and time commitments and whatnot. They give it all to one guy and say, make it happen. And so, when this person was given the CQI task and told to be the quality coordinator, he said, okay, how much time do I dedicate to this? And they said, well, give it 3 hours a week. So, he's reviewing thousands of calls per year and several hundred, if not a couple of thousand calls a month on 3 hours a week. And that's just, it's laughable, right? So they can tell everybody they've got a QA program, but they really don't.
And when you visualize that 3 hours a week, that to me, when I try to picture that proverbial Swiss cheese, I see a big old hole there.
Bingo. Well, that's what, the next question was, how do you do the job? How do you get the job done?
Yeah.
And he said, well, to be honest, I'm just not doing the job well. So what I do is I selectively I look at every cardiac arrest, because, okay, high risk, calls. I try to look at a bunch of STEMIs. And I said, well, how do you find the little old lady who's got nausea, who your folks didn't do a 12 lead on, who might be a missed STEMI? How do you find
Yeah.
those atypical
Yeah.
presentations? And because they don't trigger anything, right? So, if you're looking at the things that your EPCR program are saying are STEMIs, excuse me, because the provider said it was, so the software, spit it out in a report saying, here's one of your STEMIs. Well, that doesn't account for all the ones that were missed. So, he said, I can't. I just don't have the bandwidth to get that deep. So I go for the critical calls, the really, the big badass calls that, everybody knows are going to be a big deal, but I'm not looking at the volume that I should be looking at to catch things. And that brings us to the Swiss cheese problem, right? So if you're just only able to look at a small fraction of calls, and only because they hit some sort of threshold where your EPCR can flag it and spit it out to you and say, hey, look at this, then you're missing a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's a recognition that, well, I guess the safest way to put this is not as robust as it should be. Mm-hmm. There's certainly a recognition of that, and but there isn't a go-to source out there, it seems, but us to frankly help with that. And the answer is, when you don't have the money, the time, and the CQA talent to do EMS CQI, and which, by the way, we believe the relationship between the EMS CQI Pro and the provider is the most important relationship in that EMS agency, right? I mean,
I think so. In terms of patient care, it is.
Yeah. So if you're smooching the pooch on that aspect of the relationship, you're smooching the pooch on patient care. So you recognize time, money, absence of EMS CQI talent. What do? Well, you outsource it. So let's talk about that. They can outsource it. Not a lot of people to outsource it to. Fortunately, we're one of the few,
right.
And we see that as things are taken off on a national basis, getting hopping.
Right.
So, but talk about the reasons why you really ought to be outsourcing your EMS CQI program.
Right. There's a ton of them. And we actually, I wrote an article a number of years back. It's actually fairly lengthy. So if you got the time, it's 12 reasons to outsource your EMS CQI program. The reality is there's more than 12 reasons. I just didn't want it to drag on from 3 or 4 pages to, 25 pages. But the reasons that people call us are dollar for dollar. We can do it more efficiently than agencies can. So we're not going to compete against an agency that's spending 3 hours a week on QA, right? I mean, that's nothing. There's no money there. But if they're putting a legitimate effort into doing quality improvement and it's still not working for them, oftentimes they'll call us, and we can do, where they're doing sampling, 25% of their calls, we can sometimes do 100% of their calls for the same price they're currently doing it for. So apples to apples, dollar for dollar comparison, it's more effective because we built the subsystems and the systems needed to be as efficient as possible. So, efficiency, cost savings are one. Another is that a lot of agencies will find that they'll recoup a lot of their money that they lose. So if their providers are BLSing calls, it should be ALS, for example, and their current QA system is only looking at their cardiac arrest, they're not going to find that problem. They're not going to give the providers the feedback they need to correct those issues. We do. We actually have counseling with every single call with each provider on every call they did. So it's very, very labor intensive, but that's where the fixes get made.
And we have a calculator.
We do. Yeah, we also on our website, GirardAssociates.com, we have an ROI calculator that you can go to and you can plug in. We put it in 3 or 4 categories. Another is patient refusals, right? So if you get providers who are executing refusals inappropriately and they're getting refusals on patients who shouldn't be refusing, quite frankly, might not legally even be able to refuse. They might be intoxicated or whatnot.
Right.
Sometimes providers will still get refusals on those, but those get converted to transports if the quality improvement system is identifying that, giving the feedback back to the provider, teaching them what went wrong on that call that made them make a wrong decision, re-educate them on that, and then get them to next time make sure that's transport, that's revenue that would have been lost. So there are a number of categories that fall into that. And for agencies that are doing sampling, especially very small sampling or just doing high critical calls, you're missing opportunities to not only improve patient care, but improve your bottom line. So we and you got to put that effort in, right? You got to review every one of those calls to find these issues in order to fix them, and then be able to provide constructive feedback to the individuals to get them to change behaviors. So there's a lot of steps involved there in order to get that. And those steps get cut short in underfunded quality improvement programs, or in programs where people maybe aren't sophisticated enough to be thinking along those lines for some of that stuff. So they think that their job is only to look at the serious stuff. So that's, one of the benefits of outsourcing is, at least if outsourcing with us, is that we review all that stuff and we provide feedback and corrective action on all those things. And a lot of QA systems just don't. So, there's financial incentives, there are patient care improvement incentives. There's the objectivity part. We're very objective. We're not into the politics internally. We just want to talk about this call you did yesterday and where you could do better on it tomorrow. So providers eventually get much more comfortable talking with us. And in fact, they'll tell us all sorts of stuff. It's almost like you're a psychiatrist. It's kind of, lay on my couch and we'll talk. And they'll tell us about their family lives, and they're going through a divorce, and where they're going on vacation next week. And we create a relationship with them because we spend the time with them to get to know them, understand their thought process, how they think, why they act the way they do, so that we can figure out how to get them to change behaviors. Again, if you're just flagging calls, bringing someone in and saying, hey, do a 12 lead next time. Okay, thanks a lot. Now get out of here. I got 45 other people lined up that I got to talk to. You're just not getting that across. That message isn't coming through. So people get much more comfortable with us. And only when they're comfortable with you will they tell you stuff that they wouldn't normally tell somebody if they think they're going to get in trouble by admitting it. So they'll tell us outright, I did it because my captain who was there on scene told me to do it that way. That's the reason I did it. Okay, let's
You ordered the code red.
that. You ordered the code red. Yeah, oh, Jesus,
right.
So let's not go down that road. But yeah, so there's it's objective, it's unbiased. Nobody's got an axe to grind. It's just looking at this clinically and saying, could something have done better by our staff members, and our coordinators go back and try to reinforce that. We're just here to help you, kind of thing. So objectivity and independence are key issues to a good QI program, and that's something that an outsource provider can do.
I was watching the movie Moneyball. You ever seen Moneyball?
Oh, years ago. Yeah.
Brad Pitt and the little pudgy guy looks like a paramedic. He's a economics major from Yale or something like that.
So you're saying paramedics look like pudgy guys?
No, I'm not saying that. I mean, I might, I'm just, I don't know. That's the vision that came into my head for some reason.
All right.
So, you may recall this scene where they're in Brad Pitt's office. He plays Billy Bean, the general manager of the Oakland A's, and they're, trying to wade through all of this. They can't get the marquee players. They just lost a couple of marquee players, and they bring in this statistician, this numbers guru. Right. And there's this scene, and I'm paraphrasing, and he's going through all of these calculations that are on this whiteboard, and he's talking about coming down to one fundamental number that cuts through all of the bull that is holistic throughout baseball and how they evaluate players. And there are some analogies to that statistical coming down to one number, and I believe that was the on-base percentage. Mm-hmm. That is the one number, despite everything else that you are looking for, to judge that player on his value for the dollar. Right. And I can't help but see some similarities to that in the G&A score.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of ways, the G&A score, when you peel the layers away from the onion, you cut out the biasness. Mm-hmm. You cut out the interpersonal conflict. You cut out the, all the innuendo and the whispering and that all of that psychology that messes with your head and all those voices in your head about somebody's performance based on preconceived notions and biases.
Yeah. And that's the problem with data, right? You got to be very careful with it. There's some, you can go out and you can buy various software things that purport to help you with your QA, including your EPCR programs claim to have, robust QA modules that they have integrated into the EPCR program. But a lot of them give you extraneous data that's not particularly accurate. So the veracity of it is questionable. So How do you do a good quality improvement job when your data is corrupt? So
Yeah.
it's a common problem. So and the other problem is that for these high data geeks, not that data is not critical, it is to quality improvement, but I think there's us who are the boots on the ground, crawling through the grass with the providers, looking for things to improve type of quality improvement system. And then you've got these high level metric people who just measure all sorts of stuff and give you all sorts of data about a variety of topics, much of which can be called into question because it may not be accurate if it's coming directly from the providers without having first been vetted through the CQI process. And that's what we avoid, right? We have our own data set, but it's all vetted data after the discussions have been held and we understand what the real issues on that call were. So for us, issues are not reports that say we only have an 18% aspirin to chest pain rate. We don't do that, right? We look at why the aspirin wasn't given and determine whether it was valid reasoning or not valid reasoning, whether that cardiac chest pain needed to have aspirin given to it at all. So we look at those types of things. So it's behavior driven that drives our numbers, not numbers trying to drive behaviors.
Yeah. So the Illuminati, they do a data dump. They collect all this data. They put it into fancy reports. The data may not be accurate. It may not be vetted. It certainly doesn't have all the aspects of the story. They do a data dump. They give it to the CQI guy, and the CQI guy sits there scratching his head. Okay, now what do I do?
Well, that's the problem, because then if you drill down to the provider and you're the CQI guy and you're going to a provider and saying, hey, here's your STEMI recognition rate, here's your IV success rate, here's your cardiac or survival rates, whatever you're measuring, and you give it back to them, providers get really frustrated with quality improvement, in part because the information presented to them is not the whole story. Yeah. And they know it's not the whole story, but they're being given statistics and being told that they suck at something that they might not actually suck at, or God forbid, they suck at it less than Bobby, their partner, who does that same behavior all the time and nobody ever approaches him on it. So, so there's a huge disconnect between providers getting good feedback that's constructive, that can help them improve their behaviors and improve their patient care, versus just getting big data that is not terribly relevant. And that causes frustration, which causes a lot of the problems that CQI folks have when they approach people that don't want to be involved in this. And they've got good reason for not wanting to be involved with it in some cases. And the CQI folks have to overcome that. That's really hard to do unless you put in the work, unless you read those reports, you enter data based on your reading of the report and the verification of data, as opposed to just, what's in there is gospel and that's the end of it. So, we, after talking to the individual providers, we go back and correct scores and add comments and notes about why it wasn't a valid issue to begin with. And we put all that information into the audit so that anybody coming later on to look at that call can understand our thought process and what the discussion was that was had with the provider, and why what they did may not be as bad as it looks. Or in some cases looks worse than it looks once they start talking to you. But it's certainly a much more accurate place to start.
And with the right outsourced CQI program, that outsourced CQI program can cut through all of that drama. Yeah,
because the personalities are not involved. That's probably one of the main reasons. One of the top 3 reasons people hire us is they'll call me up and the CEO or the chief of service will say, the issue is it's pissing everybody off. People are getting stressed with each other. It's very difficult to have some of these conversations because people feel like they're being accused of bad patient care. Some of that is technique, but some of it is just, these are people you work with every day, right? So, nobody wants to be put on the spot. Nobody wants to know that, my shift supervisor came and spoke to me about something, and now forever he or she's going to think I'm a dope in regard to that, because their opinion is now shaped based on what we went through about that call. So having an outsider review it with them, that's one of the reasons they're more open with us, is they feel like they can talk to us and they know that it's not getting back to management, some of these more intimate private conversations. So they're not trying to lie and bullshit their way through the discussion. Once they start to trust us and understand that it's not all being fed back to management, it's between us and them to discuss this stuff, they start getting really comfortable and do start telling us things that, normally they can't say. They wouldn't be able to say it publicly. If there was an OEMS investigation, they wouldn't be able to say that in front of OEMS, some of the stuff that goes on in calls. And, we've been in EMS for 40 plus years. We know what goes on in the streets, on calls, on a day-to-day basis, and it ain't all pretty. So, but if you're going to solve a problem, you got to get to that level of discussion so that you can find out what the real issue was on that call and not just blame it on the provider being a bad provider.
Well, that EMS CQI job, we've done it at various stages earlier in our career, and it seems like they give it to the younger guy. He may have some chutzpah. He may know some fancy words, and they all know fancy words now because the textbooks are so big, right? Blood gases and all the fancy stuff that we weren't smart enough to know back in the day. Science didn't support us. Probably, but science didn't support us knowing that stuff back then like it does now.
Right.
But that role, boy, that's a tough role, and it's especially it's a tough role if you're a younger EMS provider. You're still in your younger 20s. You got that adolescent brain syndrome, emotional, underdeveloped frontal lobe thing going on.
Yeah.
And you got some executive functioning maturity to do, and you're not processing things, and you can tend to, do some crazy stuff when you don't put a space between the stimulus and the response. The point of all of that is you got to have the right person doing the job, and that person has really got to be about what we have come to embrace with our 18 years of doing this stuff, 19 years of doing this stuff as our G&A 4Cs and that command presence, that compassion, we said coachability, but it's coach able. Right. And you got to have that competitiveness, meaning, you really got to want to be a professional CQI guy. I mean, this has got to be a stepping stone for you. And it's not a stepping stone. Well, it's got to be a landing zone for people, a bona fide professional endeavor, right. Much like a chief financial officer.
Right.
And it's not
gotten there yet. No,
it hasn't gotten there yet, right? No, I mean, it's sort of a stepping stone, and it's not given. We don't train our CQI folks. The most important position in that company, arguably, we don't train them like we should.
No, a lot of times people get given the task because nobody else wants it, right? This is a difficult job because you're having tough conversations with folks. Anytime you're going to somebody to discuss whether they did things right, they're doing the job right, that's always going to involve high levels of emotion, right? That's always a difficult thing. So, a lot of times these jobs are jobs that nobody else wants. So you get the guy who injured his back on a call, he's on light duty, he might not be able to go back on the road, so let's stick him in the QI office, right? Let's have him looking up run reports.
Right.
And the other thing that people do is they hire people who are highly skilled clinically and say, well, this paramedic, everybody agrees is a superstar paramedic. I'm going to put him or her in the job, and they're going to do a great job of CQI if everybody does it their way because they're a great paramedic or EMT. And that doesn't work either because the most critical skill for a CQI coordinator is not your clinical skills. It's actually your conflict resolution skills. It's your ability to have difficult conversations with folks. And by the way, we have an article on that, having the difficult discussion, on our website. So it's being able to talk, de-escalate highly emotionally, potentially charged situations, and how to get people comfortable to talk with you. So, anytime people say, hey, I want to get involved in CQI, what do you recommend for, a class or something like that? And there really aren't very many good classes out there. The ones that are out there all are relegated to metrics. What should you measure and how should you measure it? But very few of them are about interpersonal skills, right? How to have those difficult discussions.
To do it.
And that's the problem with a lot of CQI coaches currently. Yep. Nobody's taught them how to do that part well. So, we spend a lot of time with our people saying your job is to educate, coach, teach, and mentor. It is not to criticize. We teach our auditors how to rate their comments in a constructive fashion. We teach our coordinators how to coach people properly. And we spend a lot of time on that. And that's very difficult. That's the tougher part of the job.
There aren't a lot of classes out there. The National Fire Academy has one. I think Pinnacle does one. NAEMSP, that's the EMS Physicians Group. They purport to have one. But, you look at the syllabus, and it's a lot of this, who is Malcolm Baldrige?
Right,
Malcolm
right.
Baldrige is, and,
Yeah, yeah.
who is W. Edwards Deming? And
Right,
that's great. It's a vocabulary lesson. It's a
right.
concept
It's
lesson.
important.
But there's no internship. There's nobody actually coaching you up out there.
And teaching you
Uh,
how to have that difficult conversation,
yeah,
right? So those outline, or they relegate 15 minutes discussion to, some providers are assholes. How do you deal with them? Type of
right.
stuff. And
Well,
that's really not what the job should be about.
no, and it's one of our four C's. It's a aspect under the four C's, but it's modeling that high performance behavior that will give you the desired results. But there is no high performance CQI person that you can emulate out
Right,
there to
right.
learn how to do this thing right.
Yeah, yeah. And again, even with us, we learned it the hard way, right?
Yeah.
We've been in business for 18 years now, 18 plus years, and we trial and errored, that's probably the correct way to put it, but various mechanisms for doing quality improvement.
You spun
I
that one
lost the
around.
word. Yeah, I did, didn't I? I completely lost, old man, lost the thought. So, over the years, we've tried everything that you can try. We've made errors along the way ourselves trying to figure out how to do this well. And we have 18 years now of trial and error, figuring things out and trying to get to the best. And we found that over the years, the statistics and the data doesn't make the improvement. It's the interaction with the providers. So that's where we concentrate. Everything else is just an aid to you doing the job, but you really have to have those interpersonal skills. So, and now, most providers don't have 18 years of trial and error on how to do QA properly, right? So
No, right.
they just don't
Yeah.
have that background. And we've got hundreds of thousands of calls in the database in which we've tried. So we've had those discussions and tried different mechanisms to get people to improve. So, there's a breadth of experience there that you're just not going to get from, even if you got a paramedic who's been a paramedic or an EMT for 35 years and you say, I'm going to make them my CQI. That doesn't mean that they've done the skills necessary to be a good CQI officer for 35 years. They've had 35 years of field experience. So now you've got to train them to do something different. And that's true in management in general in EMS, that managers in EMS don't have a lot to go on when they go from the field to the office. And a lot of times they exhibit bad management skills and bad management traits because they've had nobody to really teach them the right way. And this is a subset of that same problem that we have in EMS.
So, outsource. You outsource for an independent, unbiased review. You outsource for quantifiable results. The G&A score, Moneyball, the on-base percentage.
Right.
Outsource for a non-threatening education-based process where you got somebody outside the scope of your organization coaching you up, not coaching you down.
Right.
You outsource. Outsourcing minimizes interpersonal conflict.
Mm-hmm.
You get an expert in CQI processes and system design.
Right.
G&A. I mean, we use EMS system best practices.
Right.
And we facilitate the communication among management, medical direction, and the field providers.
Yeah, yeah. And we're still learning ourselves. New things are coming out all the time. And with all the experience that we have, we're still learning as we go, as new things happen and evolve and develop. So, that's what we advocate for our field providers when we talk to them. Always be learning, right? Constantly be learning better ways to do things, new ways to do things, right? Don't get turned off by the education process, be turned on by it. And we try to do the same thing in-house. So it's not an easy task. If you're going to do it, you need to do it properly. And the only way to do it properly is to fund it properly. And then beyond the funding, you need to make sure that whoever you're giving those dollars to are using those dollars wisely and maximizing the bang for the buck in terms of getting people to change their behaviors from lesser desirable behaviors from a patient care standpoint to more desirable behaviors.
Yeah, I mean, and you're going to get detailed reports to help you with that beyond the general capabilities of the EMS agencies, or what we have found in these EPCR programs that tout themselves as CQI enhancing. But you got to have that human element, that CQI program in there to translate that data into something meaningful that's going to translate into better quality improvement, better patient
Right,
care.
right, right. That's it. Ultimately, it comes down to, does that help the providers in the street do the right thing? There's all over the years, you and I have had this discussion as to whether EMS is better today than it was 30 years ago, and whether patient care is any better. And it's a hard question to answer, quite frankly. When we look to when I talk to chiefs of service about their systems, and they say, oh yeah, we have field supervisors who help providers on calls. We have supervisors in house who monitor things in house, and we've got an education department that does tons of education, and they list all the things that they do to try to enhance the patient care experience. And yet when we review their run reports and we score their calls, many agencies, the vast majority, still have scores in the 40s, 50s, or 60s. They have terrible scores. And the thing is, with all that infrastructure that EMS has added over the years, that bulk in management oversight, and you could argue that it doesn't necessarily result in improved patient care, because nobody is really there with the provider on the call, during the call, going through the call with them and trying to guide them along. Even if you have field supervisors, they can't be on every call, right? So it's very hard. And who's CQIing the field supervisor? Just because he or she is saying, stop what you're doing and go to the airway, that doesn't mean it's the right answer, right? So, there's a level of difficulty that's difficult to get to, and the only way to get to it is to, in retrospect, probably using retroactive QA techniques such as run review reports. But it's not just reviewing the run report; it's going to the provider, sitting down, and having a detailed discussion. Each discussion, when we talk to providers, can take several minutes and sometimes 45 minutes on one call, just discussing the merits of that one call. And we're trying to understand, what were you thinking? What was going on around you? What was happening that distracted you from this? We want to know all that so we can determine what was the best way for you to handle that particular call.
Well, our EMS leader colleagues have really got to understand, and I'll use another metaphor and analogy, but I mean, if you really care about the success of your franchise quarterback, you're going to put a quarterback's coach or an offensive coordinator in place that can develop a personal relationship with that franchise quarterback to get the best out of them.
Right.
And at a minimum, they got to know what the hell they're doing.
Right.
And if you really care about your franchise EMTs and paramedics, you got to do the same. Right. Because, unlike when we practice, these EMTs and paramedics, they're costing some money, and they got some skills, and they have opportunities to go other places, and they have aspirations to, climb the corporate ladder in the medical field. Mm-hmm. So you better start taking care of these people. That's right. And again, it starts with the CQI process and having those appropriate resources in place, the human resources, the place to coach these people up. Yeah. Or you're going to end up like last year's New England Patriots.
Yeah, right.
That's it. I mean, it's if you care about these people, get some CQI talent in there. Right. Or if you can't get the CQI talent in there, then outsource it.
Get them
not that expensive.
Right.
It's not that expensive, and we get calculators on the website that can fiddle and diddle all of this for you.
Well, much of the cost of it can actually be offset by the revenue that you're going to generate from doing the job right. Yeah. So you shouldn't be short-sighted and just look at, it's going to cost XYZ dollars for me to do CQI properly. First of all, in terms of patient care, how can you put a price on that, right? We're supposed to be about helping patients and people. How can you say that spending an extra $10, $20, $30, $40,000 a year, to do QI properly is a waste of money? It's not. So, but the cost, some of that cost can be offset. In some cases, most of the cost can be offset by folks doing the right thing once you've coached them up to do the right thing. Right. And most CQI programs are not built around spending a lot of time with providers, getting to know them, understanding their thought process, knowing exactly what types of things they're likely to do, especially under given circumstances, and why they do it in order to get them to fix it. So, you're really just spinning your wheels. Would you rather waste $20,000 a year in a badly functioning CQI program that's causing stress and anxiety amongst your members, or would you rather spend $40,000 a year to offset half of that, cost you the same amount of money in the long run, maybe even less, and have providers who are actually glad to be getting positive feedback and getting information that they can use to improve their practice and improve overall patient care? So don't be short-sighted.
Yeah, I mean, these agencies are spending 20 grand to have public relations and paint consultants come in to help them design the color of their ambulances
Yeah,
to enhance marketability.
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, that's what they're
Well,
spending their money on.
what I tell these folks is it costs less to invest in your CQI program than it does to pay a lawyer to defend you against one suit.
Yeah,
One
yeah,
suit, God forbid, 3 or 4 suits.
absolutely.
And yet,
Yeah,
so we're very short-sighted on the
yep.
CQI process thing. It should be what drives the organization, as opposed to right now where we emphasize the dollars or we emphasize, how one particular person thinks things should be run. What should be guiding your organization decision making should be how well you're providing patient care and how can you do better in that patient care with accurate, timely, detailed information from the CQI process.
And one day, Paul, one day, the G&A score will be the score that ambulance services across the United States measure themselves and are measured by.
Everybody will have a G&A score.
There you
It's
go.
funny because it's a really good way because we have a report that it's a benchmark report that we give agencies, and we give them their score as benchmark against similar sized and operated organizations. So, your score of, 89, is that better or worse than 10 other agencies out there that are similar to yours? How do you stack up? But can you imagine a world where everybody had that score, right? It's
Yeah,
an objective score that's been
right.
validated by the medical director and the whole CQI process before the number's been calculated, right? It's not just
Yeah,
measured IV success rates as told to us by the paramedics who missed the IV and didn't report it.
yeah.
So it's a great way, and in some of the jurisdictions we work with, when the regional or the state OEMS type agencies get involved, when they know that we're working the agency, they ask for the score. Let me see the report. Let me see their score, and let me see
Yeah.
where your top 3 issues are as identified by this company. So, that's helpful information for the regulatory bodies to know. If you were a regulator, wouldn't you want to know the score of every EMS agency that works within your state, or your jurisdiction, your region? So, it's a great way to get an idea on how well people are performing. But more importantly, within that score, you can see precisely what they're doing that's causing that score. Now, remember, we're not just measuring nuts and bolts, right? IV success rates, and we're not doing that.
Yeah.
When we look at problems and we come up with what are the problems that are going on, it often comes down to soft things that are not measurable by normal statistics. So, for example, what percentage of your patients are being extricated out to the truck before care is being started, instead of starting it at the patient's side as per protocol for
Right.
jurisdictions where that's the
Yeah.
protocol. And so none of your EPCR programs or your other software can give you that type of data, generally speaking. And we say, hey, people are not, writing downgrade notes on patients. They downgrade to the BLS provider. Their on-scene times for non-traumatic blah, blah, blah patients are XYZ, but here's why. Their times are long or short or not where you would expect them to be. So, we measure a lot of that intangible stuff that can't be, because the auditor reviews it and they read all that from the report, they get it, and then the coordinator goes and verifies every element that's questioned by the auditor. So, and then the medical director gives their opinion on it, right? What do they think of that? Was it okay to extricate him first to the truck before starting care in this set of circumstances, or was it not okay?
Right.
So a lot of that type of information agencies can't get to with traditional CQI measurement tools. Certainly the treatment before extrication issue is something that you don't find very often in most CQI program measurement tools. But it's an important part of the job, right? If you're dragging people out to the truck before starting care on them and they deteriorate during the extrication, and there's lots of cases where that's occurred, that happens all the time, quite frequently in many, many agencies. And if you don't know that problem's going on, how can you fix it?
You can't fix it, and herein lies the problem, because if you can't fix that, that means you're not going to improve on your G&A score.
Right.
And if you are not improving on your G&A score, you will likely not be able to partake in the, Medicare, Medicaid, insurance company bonuses that will someday be predicated upon that G&A score. So now is the time to dust off your CQI plan. If you need help with it, give us a call. We are glad to come out and help you do an EMS CQI tune-up, you need some teaching, coaching, mentoring, some data collection and analysis, give us a call. Final thoughts, Paul?
Again, I think managers need to reconsider their position on CQI. You should be looking for what you can invest and where you should perhaps pull from other areas or whatever you got to do. It should be the driving force. So don't forget that, right? That's what we're in business for, is to make sure patients get treated properly. And if you can't verify that objectively, then who knows what's really going on out there. So, and a lot of the stuff we talked about today, having a difficult conversation, the ROI calculator, the 12 reasons to outsource your CQI program, a lot of the material that we referenced today is on our site, GirardAssociate.com. So check that out. And if you just want to talk about it, even if you're not interested in hiring us, you just want to talk CQI stuff and what's going on, you need someone to vent with and maybe get some ideas on where you can doing it yourself in-house, where you might be able to change things. We're happy to talk to you. And you can contact both Kevin and I through our website on the Contact Us page. So hopefully that helps folks. And we're there for you. In any way we can help, we would be happy to. Feel free to reach out.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. That's all we have for you today. We hope you enjoyed the show and picked up a tidbit or two on outsourcing your EMS agency's CQI program. We'd love to work with you to help you reinforce your EMS CQI program. Feel free to give us a call. Folks, stay safe, stay in the fight, and Godspeed. Thanks so much, Paul. Great seeing you.
Thanks. Same here, Kevin. Talk to you soon. Goodbye, everybody.
Take care.
On 5.